G'day YouTube, warbles on a lot here. By the authority vested in me by the Tasmanian Fire Service, that is, zero authority, I pronounce it time to proceed. Piles ready, bugger all wind, and it's supposed to start raining tonight. So, let's put down a wet line. And it'll be 80 litres in the donut. $80 litres on the wet line, 16 litres in the backpack. Torch, coffee, radio, gloves. 130 litres, 30 litres of air, 100 pounds per square inch. That's that, 50 litres reloads for the backpack. And a cartoon of beer. Let's see if we can get this show on the road. Well, it is indeed burning. And it seems to be burning from the top down. And so far we have 1 metre of flame down into the pile and about 1.5 metres sticking up. So with 4.5 metres of pile, we might get 10 metres of flame on top of it. I don't know. Happily, bugger all in the way of wind. Might move the camera over to the other side. Seen from the south, you can see I didn't quite light it at the top of the pile because what little bit of wind there is supposed to be coming from the east tonight. This is looking at it from the west. Or southwest anyway. And as seen from the north. And it's putting up some sparks. And shit, oh dear, the fire's getting a fair way down inside it pretty early on. This is the side I lit it on. Quite a lot of sparks going up there. Not a lot I can do about it. But happily, it's supposed to start raining tonight at about 3 o'clock in the morning when the temperature is going to reach 100%. Okay, so now we got about 4 metres of flame on top of the 4 metre pile of wood. Ain't it a big one, man? Pretty please, Creator, take that wind away. Somewhere else. Bring it back another time. It's really kind of hard to capture this on a still camera because it's just too big for the frame. For some reason it's pulsing. It's like it's sucking air in. The air's going in and hitting the hot coals, expanding. So you've got that sort of pulse jet, ramjet throb effect. Let's just go for a little bit of a walk around it. Okay, so pretty much the top half is now on fire. The wattle tree beside it is outgassing. All right, fire's down at ground level. Wow, what have you done, Warbles? What have you done? Might have to actually get in and do a bit soon. Took months to build that. 25 trailer loads. I think I should have repressurised the water cannon rather than trusting the gauge. Because instead of starting off with 100 psi, I think I was lucky to start off with 25 or 30. Either that, or there's some rust stuck in the valve or the hose intake. But anyway, there was not a lot of water pressure there. But there was enough to do the job at a time when a backpack wasn't quite fast enough. But I've now got a pretty good black line all the way around it. But it did get out across the wetline donut in one or two places. But it fell in on itself, which is what I wanted it to do. I burnt the core out of it and let the sides fall in, rather than have the whole bloody thing pile over on one side and make a run for the horizon. So at this point in time, it's not looking too bad. I've been worried about that for a bloody long time. Well, I'm hoping that that was the exciting bit, and now I can sort of sit back, finish me cuppa, listen to the radio, and just watch it reduce in size. It is 45 minutes since I lit it. And it's now down to less than 2 metres from about 5. 6:30. Less than an hour from 2.5 times my height down to about half my height. And one of the things that a big fire is usually good for is a funeral. And in this coronavirus lockdown, one of the things people can't do is hold a funeral. So I wouldn't mind dedicating this pyre to the memory of Ken Williamson, my next door neighbour, who died about 18 hours ago in his home after a fairly miserable final 3 weeks following a 3-year struggle with liver cancer. I knew he was crook, but only for about the last 3 or 4 months. And on Friday, his son-in-law told me that he was on his last legs. We didn't live in each other's pockets. I don't think he'd ever been inside my hut in 30 years. I'd been inside his house at least once, perhaps 2 or 3 times. But he was a wonderful person to live next door to, because he never caused any trouble. He was easy to get along with. If you asked him for a hand, he'd give you a hand. If any of his sheep escaped and tried to run away, if I found him and called him, he'd always come up and do his level best to retrieve them. And let's be honest, a lot of sheep farmers, if they find that they've got a hillbilly and a greenie and a fool on the hill living on their boundary, they might use that as an excuse to see how miserable they can make a hippie with living in the bush. Well, Ken never did that. So I reckon he was a great bloke. And seeing as you can only have 5 people at a funeral, and he left a wife and 3 kids, and I know there's at least 5 grandkids between 2 of his kids. I don't know how many kids his son's got. So his missus, his kids and his grandkids couldn't get to hold a funeral the way things are at the moment. So let's just say that I've had a 3-tonne funeral pyre in memory of Kenny. And in the spirit of things, social distance, social isolation and all that shit, that was just me and the wood pile and the fire. But under normal circumstances, the original plan while I was spending months building this heap is that there was going to be invitations go out to neighbours and friends, and there was going to be a bit of a piss up, and there was going to be a few people coming up to sort of stand around and marvel at the size of the wood pile and help me be a little bit anxious at the cusp You know, when all the radiant heat was coming out sideways and it was igniting the grass. And my 80 litre wetline donut was pushed just a little bit beyond its limits. So there we go. The Kenny Williamson Memorial Unofficial Funeral Pyre, conducted on the day that he died by a respectful and admiring neighbour. Oh, I do like it when I figure out how to do something difficult and nothing actually goes wrong. Because it would have been really, really, really embarrassing and disappointing if I'd had to ring somebody up and tell them that I'd made a mess of this and put in a request for urgent, immediate assistance quickly before it run away and burnt through fences and got onto my neighbour's place. So, for all them reasons, I'm pretty happy with myself, although I'm sad that my neighbour's dead. On the other hand, 3 years or so ago, he was operated on. He had 3 years where he was pretty good. For 3 weeks he went downhill fast and he died at home. Now there's not many people who contrive to die at home from liver failure. So I reckon Kenny Williamson played a winning hand with the cards that he had to play with. Vale Kenny Williamson. If he's watching from the afterlife, I hope he enjoyed his funeral pyre. Because like I said, the way the law is in this land at the moment, I can't go to his funeral. So this is how I tell the world how pleased I was to have him as a neighbour for 30 years. And there we go. That's the actual 1 hour mark. And would you believe it? I haven't finished my coffee, let alone started on the 6-pack of beer. Those of you who pay really close attention to my channel will already be aware of this. But part of the fun of living up here, and I didn't know this till about 6 years ago, this particular ridge is where my grandfather used to come to collect charcoal for the Wharton's Garage blacksmith forge. Back in the 1940s and 50s, he used to bring my older half-brother up here. And last time Bugs come to visit me, he let that little nugget of information slip, is that he's never had any trouble finding where I live, because our grandfather used to bring him up here 10 years or so before I was thought of, conceived, back before my father's first wife died. And my father used to bring me, not quite onto this block, but pretty close to here, collecting firewood when I was a kid. So I suppose you could say that in traditional terms I had a couple of generations of ancestors' shades to call on for help when I want to play with fire up here. On my grandfather's charcoal ground. where my father used to collect firewood. But even so, there was 5 minutes or so there when I didn't actually know whether I was going to keep control of this or whether it was going to run away. It all sort of depended on whether the wind stayed at the strength and direction that it was, or whether it felt like giving me a double strength puff and a gust and turned me plans upside down for me. But it didn't quite go wrong. Just threatened to. And of course, this bloody thing would have been better if it had had a whole lot more compressed air in it. My mistake. I should have pressure tested it with my pump and made sure it had 100 pounds per square inch in it when I started. But you can't get absolutely everything right. And I think, as usual, I got 95% of everything correct, which leaves me bullshit content floating at about 5%, so yeah, such is life. Yeah. Only about knee high now. Bloody difficult. To imagine how well that went in terms of my theory that burning it from the top down would keep it in place. Almost none of it fell outside because the fire burnt down and gave it a hollow core, so the outsides fell in. And with rain forecast for tonight, tomorrow and on Wednesday, it really had to burn tonight, because if I'd left it to get rained on and then dry out again, by that stage we would have had a frost. Lowest temperature I've had up here is -7 degrees. That's because I'm up on top of the hill. Temperature inversion, see? I'm in the layer of warm air. My son tells me that in town he's already had frost on the windscreen of his car in the mornings. And down at the bottom of the valley, all the grass has started to go yellow and brown. So I didn't really have another week to wait. It was now or pretty much never, you know, wait until you get another 20 or 40 mils of rain, and even then you're still going to be burning with dry grass around it. And you saw how this put out enough radiant heat to set the grass on fire, probably 5-6 metres out away from it. And that's after I slashed it. And after I laid a wet line on it. So yeah, last possible opportunity. And seeing as it burnt on the day that Kenny died, it's his memorial pyre. I do decree. And it cooked quite a few leaves in this tree up here. Okay, 7 o'clock. Hour and a half elapsed time since I lit it. I think I'm going to listen to the news. And end the video while I watch the last of this fire slowly burning down to the point where it becomes safe to leave it. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Bit of a sigh of relief. I didn't make a mess of it. Ciao. And as I said, Vale Ken Williamson. It was an absolute pleasure to have him as a next door neighbour. If he wasn't dead, I think he would have enjoyed coming up and watching this fire. But that's just a guess. I may be wrong. Sometimes I am. But not tonight, I'm pleased to say. Ciao.